Like emeralds shining in the light, the flames flickered. Hundreds dead in the blink of an eye. Thousands more burning from the wild flames. Dozens of ships and their crews engulfed in a gazing blaze. Jon was in awe of the catastrophe that befell his men. Stannis placed his hand on Jon's shoulder, snapping him out of his shock. It was his first true battle. Trial by fire had a new meaning for him. Stannis would command his troops to prepare to disembark and continue their assault, remarking that such ploy could only be used once. Jon would remark that hundreds would die if they press on. Stannis would just answer, thousands. To Jon's surprise, the Dragonstone loyalists, without question, drew their swords. They had full confidence in their commander. They still had full belief they could win. This act of loyalty and belief reinvigorated Jon as he drew his blade as well and got onto the raft with Stannis. Stannis himself drew Lightbringer, its burning red and green hues acting as a signal light for the rest to follow. With me! Stannis rallied his army. The true battle of Blackwater was underway. For now, let us roll back the clock to before the battle, to the coming weeks and months just after the death of Ned Stark. Jaime Lannister would lay siege to Riverrun after they rose up in rebellion with Robb Stark. The same young wolf would capture the lion in the trap laid out in an ambush in the Whispering Wood. Upon his capture and learning of his father's death, Robb would hold a council with Lords of the North where they would crown him King of the North. An act that would unite the Riverlands fully to their cause, while the Vale would fully remove themselves from the conflict, same as the Dornish. As for Renly, his army was amassing near Storm's End. Most of the Stormlords had claimed from Renly after their many years of being under his leech thanks to Robert. With a large bulk of their army of the Reach at their back, the combined force was beginning to number over 40,000 strong. Their target was King's Landing itself, which now was at risk of assault with Tywin's army being tied up by Robb Stark's forces. On Dragonstone, Stannis began to consider his options. As of this moment, his army was amassing, but still the smallest of the factions, with it numbering only around 5,000. Yet this token force did not hamper Stannis in the slightest. Stannis announced to his council, which now consisted of his wife Selyse, Davos his hand, Melisandre the Red Woman, Maester Creyson, Davos' son Mathis, Alex Florent, Montfort Valerion, and Arjane Celtigar, with Jon Snow and Edric Storm also present. They would debate on their actions, with Montfort suggesting they cut off Blackwater Bay from the capital and starve the city. A good strategy, but they still lacked the manpower and ships to do so. Adrian would suggest rallying more of the Crown lands to their cause and attack Tywin's army in the rear. Without Tywin, the capital would be forced to surrender. Axel would bring up the fact that the Stormlords owe Stannis their service with him by law and oath, being their true liege lord. Leaving Renly free to do as he pleases south would be a terrible mistake. Davos would agree. While they wage war on Tywin or starve out the capital, Renly could just swoop in with his army and take the throne. A throne for only half the kingdom, Melisandre would state, noting Robb was recently crowned the new king in the north. Stannis would then rise and look closely at his map at the state of the army and positions. There were too many kings and too many wild cards in play to make any meaningful move, so Stannis would have to take each one immediately. His kingdom would not stand for such chaos while he drew his breath. Stannis would then make his decree. Adrian would march along the north of the Crown lands and begin mustering a token army near Maidenpool. Their job would be to act as a quick reaction army if Tywin would march south to aid the capital. As for Montfort, while he could not fully blockade all of Blackwater, he could begin raiding trading vessels and ships. Any amount of loss to their food supplies saves them days, if not weeks, in a siege. He would then task Jon Snow to head to Riverrun to treat with Robb Stark. His job would be to have Robb bend the knee along with the Riverlands by whatever means he can. The North and Riverlands, on their side, would solidify their claim and give them an army large enough to combat any challenger. Jon questions his ability to get them on their side, and Stannis would tell him to offer Robb concessions as if he has the power of the king, but reiterate that if he refuses, he would be considered an open rebel and treated as such, same as Tywin and Renly. The lords would then ask what his plan is for Renly, for which Stannis declared he himself, with the bulk of the force, would head to Storm's End and meet his brother. He would get Renly to bend the knee along with the Reach and Stormlords, or they would face his judgment. When questioned how he would get such an army to back down, Stannis would inform his council that the Red Woman shall accompany him. His brother shall see the light. If not, then they have a new Lord of Storms in their presence. The room would look to Edric, who knew what Stannis meant. As the lords began to leave Dragonstone to make their moves, Jon would see Stannis one last time before boarding his ship. Jon would thank Stannis for his confidence to him, to which Stannis would tell Jon that while Ned may have been his father, Jon was every bit Stannis' son. Jon, honored yet curious, would ask Stannis if he knew who his mother was. Stannis would answer, "You are a Stark by blood through and through. Never question that. It matters not who your true mother was, Essalise has always been there." Jon would ask if his mother is alive, and Stannis would answer, "She died giving birth to him." He would then ask her for her name, and Stannis would just answer, "Do this task for me, and when you return, I'll tell you all you wish to know." Jon would smile and give Stannis a firm handshake. "It will be done, my king." Jon would then load onto his ship and set sail. As for Stannis, he looked over the bay at his massing of his army, and knew that what would come next would be a pivotal point in the war. Stannis arrived to Storm's End just in time to witness the end of a tourney. Renly had held it to see who amongst his followers would be in service of his Kingsguard. A bold and flamboyant move to do so when he was at war with the realm. Stannis would see that Catelyn Stark was also present, and found it interesting that Robb would treat with Renly before him. Renly would ask if Stannis had come to pledge loyalty, but Stannis would just rebuff him and declare that he was king by law and right, and that if Renly were to announce his claim now, then there would be no bloodshed. Renly would scoff at his brother, tossing him a peach and telling him not to take the world so seriously. Perhaps if he smiled once in his life, the lords might have been more inclined to stand with him, and not Renly. Stannis would smirk in kind, making his brother uneasy. Stannis would then say his piece. Renly would have until tomorrow to bend the knee, in which case he would be named his heir until he fathered a son of his own and keep Storm's End as his home. If he did not, then their dispute and claim to the throne will be decided by a trial by combat. Let the young would-be king fight for his crown. Many that night would object to Stannis' proposal, claiming he was putting so much at risk of a moment of chance. Yet Stannis would rebuff his lords and ignore them. He knew this needed to be done. Melisandre would then offer to use her power and end the threat of Renly tonight. Yet Stannis would shut her down as well. He would argue that she should have faith in him. If he truly is the prince that was promised, then tomorrow he'll be the lord of the Stormlands. Besides, he would not assassinate his brother with magic, just as much as he would not send his men into pointless, no-win battle scenarios. No, the Stormlords need to see him as their king here and now. Whoever Renly chooses as champion, he will face them and win, or he truly wasn't meant to be king in the first place, in which case he would suggest to his lords that they serve Robb Stark if he dies. Morning came, and Stannis with his lords approached Renly, and as they met between their two armies. "What is your answer, little brother?" "I accept your challenge. We shall have our trial by combat." "Then who is your champion?" "I name myself." "And my king's god." The lords erupted in outrage at the declaration. "We shall have a trial of 7, just like Maegor. Do you accept this challenge, or shall we have all-out war, brother?" "Very well. Who amongst you lords of Blackwater will stand with your king today?" Stannis cried out to his men. Alex Florent was quick to draw his sword, along with Mathis Seaworth, to the surprise of Sir Davos. 3 more of Stannis' commanders stood ready and drew their swords. Lastly, Edric Storm spoke up before Davos could argue. Edric would argue that should Stannis fall today, he has no place in the Stormlands anyway. As for Mathis, he argued he was a much better fighter than his father. Stannis and his band stepped forward, swords drawn, standing in their light and medium armor, as Renly and his Kingsguard stood in full plate armor. By all account, Merlute stood with better fighters, as he had Loras Tyrell, Brienne Tarth, and 4 other knights with him. Renly and his band approached, while Stannis stabbed his sword in the mud, and seemed to pray. Loras and another knight of the Rainbow Guard charged Stannis first, as Renly hit back. Stannis quickly rises and flings a bunch of mud into the face of the knight, blinding him. Stannis dodges Loras and kicks the other knight down, pointing for Edric to take him, while Loras and Stannis engage in their fight. Mathis engages Renly head-on, while Axel Florent and Brienne enter a one-on-one duel. The other knights clash around them. Edric quickly pins his foe to the ground and kills him by stabbing him in the neck. The 3 Dragonstone soldiers also fight dirty against their well-armored opponents, flinging dirt and mud onto them and choosing to grapple instead of fight sword to sword. This was the difference between veterans of war and the nobility that had never fought outside the tourney. Unfortunately, things begin to swing against Axel Florent as he trips over his own footing, pressing Brienne, who seizes the moment, cutting at his leg. Axel attempts to recover, but a large woman kicks him down and ends him with a blade in his neck. The other Dragonstone men rush her, but her fury in that moment stuns them as she cuts them down one by one, only to be struck by a stone in the back of the head by Edric's Storm. Mathis continues pressing Renly, the two very similarly matched, but just as Mathis believes he has Renly on the ropes, the young would-be king shoves his blade into his chest, killing him to the cries of Davos. Stannis ignores the cries as he focuses on Loras, whom by all accounts is the second coming of Jaime Lannister, and he fought like he knew it. But Stannis would not fall today. Allowing his plates to take the blunt of Loras' slash, he struck the young knight in the helm with his guard and pommel, knocking his helmet off. Yet it was a risky move, as Stannis now bled from his side. Loras, seeing Stannis hold his side, lunged forward, hoping to drive his blade through him. To his shock, though, Stannis let the blade make contact with his lower left side. The blade tore flesh as it ripped through his clothes, yet this was all Stannis needed, as he brought Lightbringer down upon Loras, ending him to the wild cries of Marjorie and Renly. The two brothers stare each other down, and for a moment, Stannis, seeing the fury and anger in his brother, he hesitates. He had never seen this side of Renly before. Renly, focused on Stannis, makes his way to kill his older brother. Yet, as fate would have it, it would not be his day. A blade would shove through Renly's neck, killing him, and the one to do so would be Edric. Stannis would look on in shock, but Edric would just walk over and raise his arm. Hail Stannis, King of the Seven Kingdoms, by right and law, and by the favor of the Seven. Many of the Stormlords bowed then and there that day. Some others as night fell. Yet by morning, the Tyrells and the Reach army had gone. It mattered little, though. Stannis had claimed the Stormlands and named Edric Lord Paramount of Storm's End. They now would prepare to march north for King's Landing. Jon had never been to Riverrun. It was quite the place, the castle being surrounded by the rivers. The doors to the great hall opened as a party of people entered. There was Edmure Tully, Lord of Riverrun, and the Blackfish, followed by Robb Stark along with Lords Karstark, Bolton, and Umber. Robb welcomed Jon, as he was happy to finally meet his half-brother. Jon would comment that from the letters Ned wrote to him, he always wanted to meet his half-siblings in kind. He had always hoped that they would get along. After trading pleasantries, Robb would then inquire what word he brings from Stannis. Jon would then say that Stannis, by law of the Seven Kingdoms, he is the heir to the throne, not Joffrey, and certainly not Renly. Stannis asks that the North and Riverlands pledge fealty to him and join him as a united front against the Lannisters. Robb would ask what Stannis would promise for their loyalty, as Robb is already a king with all of the North and Riverlands under his command, and even ties to the Vale. Jon would then suggest a marriage proposal, one between Robb and Princess Shireen. Robb would argue that he's technically already betrothed to the Freys, and to break his oath would then make him an oathbreaker. Besides, like he said, he already was a king. Jon would argue that if it's a throne he wants, then by marrying Shireen, he would be named Crown Prince of the Seven Kingdoms, and ascend to the throne after Stannis. Then one of his lords here in the room could be named Wardens of the North in his stead, perhaps the Umbers or the Boltons. As for the Freys, why not betroth them to the Tullys? Or better yet, he has 4 other siblings that can marry, the Freys extending their bloodlines. Robb would correct Jon and say that he has 5 siblings, giving a nod. He would then ask if Jon has the power to guarantee these proposals, and Jon would answer that King Stannis had entrusted him his power to come to an agreement between the two factions. When Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon rode together, they took down the dynasty of the Dragon. Now Stannis once more asks that the wolf and stag unite to slay the lion. Robb thought long on the proposal. He would be free of his proposal with the Freys, and while the North and Riverlands would be folded back into the Seven Kingdoms, he would still be their ruler. Robb would then ask if his time with his lords to hold council and speak to Jon during dinner. Jon would agree and leave them be. In the council chamber, Robb would inquire what his lords thought. Great John Umber would say that he means to only bend the knee to Robb and not a Southerner. Lord Karstark would simply comment that he would follow Robb as long as he can dispense justice on Jaime Lannister. Keeping him prisoner at this point for potential trade is a lost cause. Edmure would simply say that Robb is king, and his word is law. If he needs to marry a Frey, then so be it. But Walder would want more than just him. Robb would have to marry Bran and Rickon as well. The Blackfish didn't like the idea of it, but if Stannis was on their side with the Stormlands, then Tywin would be forced to either give up his family or his lands in the west. They could win the war quickly. Robb would then question Bruce on his take, and Bruce would agree with both Edmure and the Blackfish. The Freys would require both Bran and Rickon to marry besides Edmure. He would also offer his own bastard Ramsay to sweeten the deal. With an alliance with Stannis, they would control 3 of the 7 kingdoms, and an alliance of the Vale, along with potential support from Dorne, since they have their own hatred for the Lannisters. 5 out of 7 kingdoms unified under Robb and Stannis, Stag and Wolf. It would then be Robb received word from Theon Greyjoy. As night would come to an end, the lords feasted. Robb and Jon would meet to discuss the proposal. Robb would inform Jon, to his delight, that he agrees to the proposal and he will bend the knee on the agreement that he is betrothed to Shireen and is named heir. Jon would shake his half-brother's hand, declaring it done. He would then ask when he can expect the North's army to reach Robb, who would state that the North cannot fully commit to marching south. Robb had received word from Theon Greyjoy that Balon had declared himself king of the Iron Islands once again, and means to wage war upon the North. Theon has gone to Winterfell to ready defense with the help of Howland Reed. So Robb must head back north with his troops and repel them. Jon would ask if there is any assistance he can give him now, and Robb would inform him that Blackfish would accompany Jon back to Dragonstone, along with a token force of Northmen and Rivermen of 1,000 and Blackwater. Edmure is to hold Riverrun, while Robb and the Karstark's numbers march back north. Jon would then ask about Stannis and his army. Stannis' token army won't hold them back, to which Robb says that he will force his hand. Robb has named Roose Bolton as acting commander of a second army of nearly 8,000 men, made of Frey and Boltons, to press further east towards Harrenhal. Their job would be to draw Tywin's army out in the open, or force him to dig in, or force him to retreat back to King's Landing and lose the west. Jon loved the plan, but he would ask if Robb to trust Roose, since he had heard of the infamous blood feuds between Boltons and Starks, to which Robb would inform him that since being crowned king of the North, Roose had been acting hand of the king, and that Robb had declared that once he becomes crown prince, Roose would be named Warden of the North until Bran or Rickon become of age and marry. Plans were set and pacts made. As morning came the next day, Jon and the Blackfish, with their troops, marched back south with haste, eventually making it to Duskendale, where Adrian Celtgar would inform Jon of Stannis' victory at the Trial of Seven against Renly, and now marches for King's Landing, while Tywin's army is pinned. Jon would inform Adrian of Robb's situation, and inform Adrian to join his 2,000 with the Blackfish's 1,000 and move to pincer Tywin at Harrenhal, with Roose Bolton's army to keep him away from King's Landing. He would make a beeline to Dragonstone and join Stannis. The war was coming to a close. Now we return to the present, where Stannis' fleet burns in Blackwater Bay. Tyrion Lannister had laid a trap of wildfire, and the explosion that followed was a glorious sight to behold. Yet this did not deter Stannis, whose army pressed the attack. A battering ram was pushed towards the mud gate. Archers fired at each other from both sides of the wall. Ladders were run along the side of the walls as hundreds scaled them. The Hound himself let out sorties to repel attackers at the gate. Stannis and Jon each led their own party atop the walls, each one taking a flank of the gate house in hopes to capture it. Stannis was right, Jon thought to himself. As the battle raged on by the hour, thousands by now had died. 3 times the attackers scaled the walls, and 3 times they were repelled. It was on the 4th they made a breakthrough. Stannis himself was atop the wall. Each kill he made drove up the morale of his troops and gave them great vigor to keep fighting. Jon as well showed he was a capable warrior. It was his first true battle, and he did not know if he truly had it in him. Yet when the time came, and Gold Cloaks went for the kill, he pushed on. He would initially kill 3 men in quick succession. their blood spilling over him as a sword and dagger found the gaps in the armor found in their necks. The wall was being taken. Yet just as hopes shined that Stannis and the army would win that day, a dark omen would drown out all other sound. A horn blowing in the distance. Stannis would look over the wall and see thousands of horsemen clashing into his assault. Their surprise flanking maneuver causing his army to begin to rout. The banners Stannis saw he couldn't believe. They were that of the Tyrells. Their army had come to save the Lannisters against Stannis. And leading this host, many would say it was the great ghost of Renly himself, as it was his armor leading the charge. Yet time would eventually reveal it to be none other than Garland Tyrell, who had assembled the army to avenge the loss of his brother and wearing Renly's armor to add insult to injury. Joining Garland was Brienne of Tarth, who had also come to avenge Renly. The battle was lost. Jon rushed to pull Stannis away as he begged for his men to stand and fight, but it was too late. As they fled the battle, they would see a strange sight. Tyrion Lannister was wounded on the battlefield, and he was being guarded by a young squire named Podrick, and another soldier named Bronn, who had come back for them. Stannis and Jon were ready to kill the three, but Pod would declare that the Lannisters are trying to kill them. Hearing this strange information, Stannis would see some silver lining from this battle. He would lose the assault, but gain a great captive. Stannis and Jon would take the three of them back to Dragonstone. The Battle of Blackwater was over, and news would spread of Stannis' defeat. Yet not all would be a total loss. With Stannis' alliance with Robb, the army of the Blackfish and Roose Bolton would force Tywin away from Harrenhal and back to King's Landing. The Blackfish would hold Harrenhal with his troops, while Roose would continue to raise the Westerlands. House Celtigar would stand firmly with their raised troops at Duskendale. Lastly, Edric Storm, loyal to Stannis, would be able to rally back support from many of the Stormlords to Stannis' cause after the defeat of Blackwater. He would argue that those of the Reach were so quick to abandon them when Stannis came, and even quicker to raise arms against them when it suited them. They were not to be trusted. The war had reached a fiery climax, and the lines had been drawn between the factions. The Lannisters and the Tyrells, backing Joffrey, formed a powerful alliance with their armies combined, now large enough to combat that of Robb Stark and Stannis Baratheon. For now, it was a stalemate between the two sides. Robb and his army marched back north to the Twins, and Stannis with his to Dragonstone, as the two began to set their next plan of actions in motion. The War of Five Kings will continue. And that is where we are going to end episode 2 today. So, yeah. Feeling good about where the story is going. I really like the idea that if Jon was working for Stannis, he would be able, in some capacity, to swing the North over to Stannis' side. Especially with the fact that Stannis taking the Stormlands as his own. I feel like he would leave, at least in this story, with Edric on his side, would leave Edric in charge of the Stormlords. And with Edric on Stannis' side, he'd be able to keep the Stormlords, a part of his army and faction. And I really like the idea that Robb would be looking for a way to get out of his pact with the Freys. And he would be open to joining Stannis if he would be named Crown Prince. Because that way, if he was the Prince of the Seven Kingdoms, he would still be in charge and liege lord over the North and the Riverlands, and they would still be following him. Because even though they crowned him the King of the North, I think if he was named King of the Seven Kingdoms, they would still be loyal. And him being the Crown Prince, making him the number 2 in the entire war to Stannis, I think the Northern Lords would be loyal. Especially with Roose Bolton, who, up until basically the tides turning and Jaime Lannister being set free, was fully in on the North and the Northern cause. Same with, I think, even the Freys, up until their pact is broken by Robb Stark and the tides are turning against him. But I think if Stannis was still in power with the Stormlords, even after the defeat of Blackwater, I think Roose would be still open to the idea of claiming fealty to the North. And hey, if he was given the opportunity to become Warden of the North by staying with Robb, I think he would take it. And then with the Freys, I believe they would still be open to marriage pacts by extending their family into both the Tullys and the Starks at the same time. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to set up the story. And then there's also that book aspect of Garland Tyrell being the one to wear Renly's army as he charged in. I like that idea, and I like that the Tyrells would still join the Lannisters, because there's no way they could join Stannis, especially with the fact that they want power and Stannis is so adherent to the law. But yeah, that's where I wanted to leave the story today. I'm already working on part 3, but yeah, this story is shaping up to be a good one. I'm kind of proud of it. But yeah, this has been another Game of Thrones fanfic. I was your host of the Galaxy's Cantina, JD, signing out. Peace.
You a poopy pants, liar.